Welcome from Envisage. My name is Bill Hull and I'm here with Stacie Bornemann. We're from the Presbyterian Senior Care Network, and we're delighted to spend some time with you to talk about the 5 most important starting points that we believe are crucial for you to consider as you put together a plan for your future. Now, Stacie, the title says something about experts.
Indeed.
I heard a definition that an expert is someone who's from at least 100 miles away who has a briefcase. So I don't think either of us qualify for that. Another definition I really like of expert is someone who has made all the mistakes that can be made in a certain area, and I can kind of relate to that.
Yeah, I think that's more us.
Yeah, but I think today for us is we're talking about senior living and putting together, I think we decided together we have 48 years of experience in the senior living space,
Yes, we
helping hundreds of seniors and their families put together a plan, helping them have the very best future they can. Maybe the best definition for us today is that we're someone who has seen all the mistakes that can be made. We've seen them, and that's really why we're here today, huh?
Absolutely. And I think it's good that we just come together and start this conversation. Start talking about these 5 points that you and I feel so passionately about, because too often enough, I think people think about it, but they don't think deeply enough about things. And without that deep thought on these 5 subject matters we're going to talk about, people can end up experiencing a future that is far different and far more difficult than they ever really imagined.
And we've seen that over and over, haven't we? So we want today to be practical and personal for you. We want to alert you to some topics that maybe you haven't spent a whole lot of time considering, but that we think everyone needs to think about in order to avoid some of those mistakes. And our hope is that in this short time, maybe you'll take out of this 1 or 2 nice ideas or something you can think about as you implement your plan for the future. And of course, we'd always love to continue the conversation with us here at Envisage. So stay tuned. We'll find some easy ways to help you do that if that's something you're interested in down the road. But just as we begin, before I throw you the first question, Stacie, maybe you're asking yourself, well, what is Envisage? I'm not sure I've ever heard of Envisage. Envisage is a members-only program that works hand in hand with your financial plan so that if and when the time comes that you need care or personal assistance or some nursing help, you'll be able to easily access that kind of care within the privacy of your own home. We're not an impersonal 800 number. We're really not a long-term care policy. And we don't propose to be one size that fits everybody. We know that. But our members appreciate the idea that they would rather not use an assisted living facility or a nursing care facility if the time comes that they need that kind of help. And they're willing to allow us to handle and manage those things for them so that they have the highest possible amount of personal control in their lives, and they know that they're going to get the highest possible quality of care within the privacy of their own homes. So that's what Envisage is all about. And as I begin to talk about that, it throws us right into our first topic for today. Stacie, starting point number 1, which is that if you want to have a comprehensive plan, you can't wait until you need it.
That's right, Bill. The time to make a plan is long before you need it. That way, you and those that you care most about know exactly what your wishes are and what lies ahead. One of my favorite writers, J.R.R. Tolkien, once said, "It does not do to leave a live dragon out of your calculations, if indeed you live near one."
A live dragon.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Those dragons are what you want to stay away from, right?
Yeah,
And with a good
yeah.
comprehensive plan, you actually can.
Okay.
So we've heard time and time again, people say, I've got this, I'm healthy, I'm not going to need a long-term plan, right? Have we not?
Yes.
Or I've never experienced this within my family, I've got things covered. I wish that were true for everybody that we encountered. But actually, we know statistically that most of us over the age of 65 are going to need some sort of long-term care. Long-term care averaging about 3 years.
That's right. And it's not about a genetics.
No,
totally,
it really isn't.
Is it?
Actually, in fact, another statistics that really sits in my head is, did you know that 70% of how we age doesn't have anything to do with genetics, but is everything about lifestyle?
Yeah, it's only 30% is genetics.
Exactly. So that just means we got to get out of here, Bill, and get on the treadmill again, right?
Yes,
and take good care of ourselves,
That's
no
right.
doubt, for sure.
That's my dragon.
No, that's your dragon. Well, and I imagine some of us, have been through this, or we've been caregivers, or we know somebody that has been impacted by thinking that they had a plan all buttoned up, but maybe they just didn't. Something that comes to mind is a friend of mine, Jesse. And Jesse and I had been friends for a very long time. He had lost his wife within the last 10 years or so, and experienced a tragic loss of his daughter. And we would talk often about what is his long-term care plan, what does he have in place for aging as a future. And he said, I got it all covered. I'm able to self-insure. I have it all buttoned up. And then Jesse and I lost touch for a period of time, and I come to find out that he had suffered a severe stroke. And that's why we were not in touch. He wasn't able to reach out. And I did learn that his very best friend, who I also knew as well, his name was Fred, was now his primary caregiver.
Oh, wow.
So this gentleman went from the guy who went to having breakfast with every day at the beach house to now all of a sudden being his primary caregiver. That's a completely different dynamic than those two gentlemen had ever imagined.
Yeah.
And I shortly after that time, with years of taking care of Jesse, Fred actually suffered a severe heart attack from the guilt and anxiety that he had had, because somewhere along that journey, Jesse ended up in a nursing home because Fred couldn't care for him. So now Jesse remains in a nursing home all alone, and really, knowing Jesse, I know that he did not want that responsibility to be on his best friend, and he certainly didn't mean to cause his friend that kind of stress and anxiety.
So, okay, let me stop you a minute. You are not just talking about a financial plan. You're talking about something else. What do you mean by having a long-term care plan?
Well, Bill, you're right. Not just a financial plan. Now, granted, the finances are important, absolutely. But the National Institute of Aging defines long-term care as a variety of services designed to meet an individual's need in whatever place and location that they need it, but at a time when they're unable to perform the activities of daily living that they need to be safe and independent. That is what I'm talking about, having that long-term care plan in place. Now, that said, having been in the senior living industry for over 25 years, I've seen that delivered just as the National Institute of Aging states, in a variety of settings. Adult day services is a form of long-term care services,
Sure.
Assisted living, nursing home services. But the ones that I've seen work the best is a long-term plan where both someone's financial plan and their care plan work in tandem to ensure that that individual's true needs are not only met, but delivered in a fashion of which they want it to be, where they want it to be, and when they want it to be, by someone they trust.
Oh, exactly. So just having enough money in the bank is really not a plan for the future, at least not a very good one. But I mean, I can see why people maybe emphasize the money, because some of these issues that come up, like with your friend Jesse, these are tough things to think about and plan for. You may not know what lies ahead.
And I do believe, Bill, I believe that people, for the most part, recognize that these sorts of things may happen. They've experienced it, they've seen it, they've had a friend, they may happen. And in many cases, I actually believe that many people believe that they have a plan in place that covers it. But let's play out a scenario. You know, most people will say, if I'm going to need long-term care, I'm going to have it brought into my house. What you and I know, and what we've seen so often, is that to bring long-term services into the house is not an inexpensive option. And at first, the home health services require a minimum of 4 hours a day. So the thought of, well, I'll have them come in for 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the evening, that's not going to work. It's going to be 4-hour blocks. So even just 4-hour blocks a day once a day for a year is approximately $36,000. And before you know it, it's 8 hours a day, $76,000. And then it's almost at that borderline of, should I be looking at facility-based care, or can I manage this? And managing it at home, when you're in that place of, could it be a facility or at home services 24/7 is upwards around $220,000 annually.
Yeah, this is where we get to our starting point number 2. This kind of care costs a lot more than people think.
It absolutely does.
That nursing home is even less money than care at home when you get to that stage.
It absolutely does. And we talked a little bit about some statistics that we're all too familiar with. And this year in 2021, the Alzheimer's Association indicates that 1 out of 10 persons over the age of 65 years old has already been diagnosed with some form of Alzheimer's or dementia. That's a staggering number of individuals at such a young age.
Yeah.
And the cost of care to deliver persons with Alzheimer's and dementia care is nearly triple some of those costs that I just mentioned.
Yeah, it's very expensive and it's very costly in many ways, emotionally and financially and in every other way. And what we know, 10% age 65, but by age 85, that number goes to 38%, Stacie.
It's staggering.
With Alzheimer's and dementia.
It's staggering. It's certainly a growing concern that we hear often. And you know, when I shared some of those dollar amounts with you and the cost associated with care, whether in-home or facility-based care, maybe for some of those watching, that really scared them. But maybe for others, we thought, I got that. That's why my financial advisor says you can self-insure, you have a nice nest egg. But I guess I would ask us all to think about, is that how we want to spend our nest egg, our life's work paying for care? Or would it be better to consider the idea of leaving that money to friends and family, or the charitable organization that you're most passionate about?
Right. So we're talking about a long-term care plan. We're talking about the costs going up. Let me jump in with starting point number 3.
Fantastic.
Yeah, which is that finding that kind of care to come in is getting harder and harder. Now, years ago, we didn't even worry about these kinds of plans, right? Because if it was mom or dad or Uncle Joe that needed help, we just moved them into our house. And that's how we took care of their long-term care needs. But it's a different age, and very, very few folks now today in America find that that's much of a workable situation. For one thing, the kids may be across town, they may be across the state, they may be across the country, they may be on the other side of the world. We don't know about the kids. On top of that, the seniors themselves aren't necessarily saying, I love that one commercial that's out there now where the kids are all ready for mom to move in and she goes, yeah, thanks, I got it covered, I'm not coming in. Mom wants to be independent. More and more of our seniors we're finding are working, even up in through their 80s. They want to, it gives them purpose and meaning. They're volunteering, they're traveling, they want to stay independent, they do not want to be a burden to the people that they love. And so this phenomenon is just growing, this need for caregivers. On top of that, we're seeing a huge demographic shift going on in our country. The baby boomers, of which I am one, are turning 65. My day's coming, not just yet, but it's not out there too far. But 10,000 baby boomers every day are turning 65. And that's going to happen every day for the next 10 years, 10,000 a day. And so it's really a matter of supply and demand. Over the last 10 years, we've seen maybe a growth in caregiving of about 1%. But the need for care, the demand for care, has exploded by almost 50%. So what we know is that this is going to get worse and worse. It's going to be harder and harder to find. Now, quality places like Presbyterian Senior Care Network or Lutheran Senior Life or some of these kinds of places are going to attract the best kind of caregivers. But you're right. It's getting to a point where it won't matter how much money you have. It's getting harder and harder to find that kind of quality care. What would be great is to build into your plan, and I think that's what you were talking about, when they work together in tandem, to have built into your plan that you know what the number is that you're going to call. And wouldn't it be great to have insider information about how to navigate through that maze of finding a good caregiver if and when you need it, who can come into your home, provide the care you need in the way you need it, how you want it? How valuable would that be?
Tremendously, tremendously valuable, which leads us to starting point number 4.
Which is that an awful lot of people feel like they have their plan covered, and they really don't.
Absolutely. How many times, Bill, do you hear someone say, I have Medicare, that's covered, I know that that'll cover my long-term care needs?
All the time.
So do I.
Got Medicare, got my supplement, I got what I need.
That's right. And we do need our Medicare, but Medicare is not designed to pay for our long-term or personal care needs. In fact, Medicare covers hospital stays, short-term rehab stays, doctor's office visits. It does not cover long-term care or personal care needs. And in fact, when we think about the coverage for short-term rehabilitation that Medicare covers, we know that Medicare allows us 100 days of coverage for short-term rehab services. But did you know that of those 100 days, it's only the first 20 that Medicare pays entirely in full?
Right.
And then after day 20, there's a copay, and that's our responsibility or your co-insurance responsibility. But 20 days, and in fact, the average stay in a short-term rehab center right now isn't 20 days, it's about 11.
It's not even the 20 days. So the idea of long-term care planning, I mean, it's just ridiculous. Medicare is not going to cover that. People also sometimes have a long-term care policy, insurance policy. That's not going to always do the job either, is it?
Good point. No, that's another area that we could spend an entire workshop on. I have a long-term care insurance policy that's going to supplement my needs, and there's great detail in each and every policy that is so variable in each instance that there's oftentimes a waiting period and an elimination period, meaning that you can't even access that long-term care policy that you have until after 100 days. That's a long time to wait.
Right, and how they define what an activity of daily living is. You and I might define it one way. For example, meals. We might say, well, I broke my ankle. I can't go to the grocery store and buy food. I can't get my meals. Can't cook. No, they define meals as, can you bring the spoon to your mouth? Oh, well, then you don't need it. We don't need to cover that. There are a lot of gaps with the long-term care that people need to really be aware of and really look into. You had a story about some friends of yours, a really good friend of yours who got really stuck with this Medicare and long-term care.
It's true. I do. Just a short story. A very dear friend of mine, primary caregiver for her husband. And when I say that, I don't mean that the husband was not well, just that she took care of everything from household chores to activities to meals. God bless him, he doesn't even know how to boil water. Mm-hmm. But he had a double knee replacement, and that was going to be okay because she was going to be the caregiver. During that time of his recouping, she was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer.
Oh, man.
So as you can imagine, everything that she was doing for him during his recovery time, she wasn't able to do for him, let alone what she needed for herself. So knowing my history in long-term care, she reached out and said, Stacie, can you help me navigate this? I know we have a plan though, because I have this long-term care policy that we paid into for over 30 years. After countless phone calls and discussions with her and I together on the phone with the insurance company, they'll pay for the care and services that she needs 90 days from the point that we called. At that point, Bill, I don't know that she'd need all that. And even if she did need it, what she needed was help now.
Right.
So her plan that she thought she had really had a lot of gaps.
Yeah, exactly. And your story about your friend leads me to starting point number 5, which is if you don't have a comprehensive plan as you age, you really are leaving it up to your spouse or your family or your friends to step in and provide that care for you. Now, that's not always a bad thing. Maybe that is the very best plan that some family might come up with. Maybe there is a family member or that lives next door or just down the street, or maybe there's someone who's able to step out of their normal lives and help out for short term or even long term. Maybe they have the expertise to do that. But most of us do not want to be a burden to our families like that. And caregiving itself can be a very daunting task. As you know, Stacie, we look at these kinds of statistics, and the statistics for family or friend caregivers, 32% of them have to give up their jobs in order to provide care for their loved one. And they're kind of caught. They feel guilty if they do, they feel guilty if they don't. It creates a lot of issues for them. And we also know that caregiving itself is a very emotionally draining and difficult task no matter who does it. At Presbyterian Senior Care Network, we have programs just for caregivers to try to help them get the strength and support and encouragement that they need. And statistically, over 60% of them show signs of clinical depression. I mean, this is a serious thing in our country.
Absolutely.
And so it's just not a flip thing to say, well, you know, I'm going to get my granddaughter or somebody will help me, or I know I have great neighbors and they're going to help. You really, if you do that, are going to be left with some gaps, and other people are really going to have to step in. I know we're showing the picture of a beautiful couple, husband and wife. Those are my parents. And they were on the cover of an Alzheimer's magazine. My father suffered with Alzheimer's for 12 years. And that's my mother there, who was his caregiver. They had no plan. And so she felt compelled. It was her job. She thought it was absolutely hers and hers alone to provide for his care. And she did the best she could, but I'm going to tell you what, this became an overwhelming task, just overwhelming. She was determined to keep him home as long as she possibly could. It is not too much to say that it absolutely altered the entire course of her life and of many parts of our lives that my father had the situation he had, and that my mother, I mean, she felt guilty, we felt guilty, everybody felt guilty. Then she got sick, you know, and who's going to do the caregiving? I mean, it was a big, big thing. Without a comprehensive plan that you have as you age, you really are leaving this up to your family and friends in ways that most people just don't want to do to their families. Well, so here's where we are. We've got 5 crucially important starting points. Number 1, if you want to have a plan that works, you can't put it off until you need it. Number 2, paying for care costs more than most people think. Number 3, finding someone to provide the care is getting harder and harder.
And number 4, you can't rely on Medicare and your long-term care insurance to lull you into believing that you have things covered. Number 5, which you just spoke of, without a comprehensive plan for care in place, you very easily could end up not only not in control, but burdening those that you love the most.
Well, as we end today, I just want to encourage you, if you'd like to talk about any of these things with us here at Envisage, we'd invite you to call us. We also have created a free fact sheet about these 5 important starting points with some nice data points and websites and so forth, resources where you can turn. And so give us a call at Envisage. Our number is 412-826-6110, or you can always visit us on the web, www.envisage.org. That's important, that .org. We're not a .com, because we're a nonprofit and our goal is to serve our members. So reach out to us. We'd be glad to meet you wherever you find yourself in that journey. You know, someone has said that Planning is bringing the future into the present so you can do something about it today. Hopefully our time together has been an encouragement, maybe a challenge. We'd like to have inspired you to act. Do something today about your plans for the future. And certainly if there's anything we can do to ensure that you have joy on the journey, we're here to help. Thank you, Stacie.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, all of you, for joining us. All the best.